and welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and today's guest is my good pal, Tracy Holemeyer. This is her second trip on the podcast. She was here a couple years ago talking, I think, primarily about breath work, but she's back. And if you missed that conversation or don't know Tracy, she is a lovely human being. I adore her. I've known her for many years now. I actually used to coach her. She's very open about that. So yeah, if you hire a coach, you might be on their podcast one day. It's in the realm of wild possibilities and potentiality. But Tracy is a somatic practitioner. She is deeply rooted in the earth while simultaneously stretching towards the heavens. She's a steward of healing and stays inspired by the capacity for resiliency and expansion, including soul and spirit. And in this conversation, we kick off with a talk about menopause and hot flashes, and then we dive deep into female embodiment and the mature feminine. We talk about divinity and dignity and all kinds of ways to make yourself proud, to raise yourself up. And Tracy's very open and very honest and super grounded. Anyway, she's great. You'll love this. I've included links in the show notes. She's offering a free breathwork class with her if you use the coupon code free. Gosh, what's the coupon code? Free. What is it? First free. If you use the coupon code first free on her website, you get a free breathwork class. She's got an Instagram and a website. You can check those out as well in the show notes. That's enough from me. Please enjoy this lovely conversation with Tracy Holemeyer. Here we go for real. Now we're really going. You were just telling me about the hot flashes that you're experiencing.
We'll start off with that. That's a great segue into, hi, I'm Tracy. I have hot flashes.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's this new experience of moving through this phase in my life, and I am not in the space of menopause, but there's something called perimenopause, and hot flashes are a thing. Hot flashes are a thing. I think it's to remind us how hot we actually are, and just that's just a joke. I'm kidding. Taking it seriously.
Yeah. Does it feel like, excuse my ignorance, but I've never had a perimenopausal sensation in my system. Does it feel like you just randomly get super fucking hot and like you need to turn the air on or take sweaters off?
Yep. And for me, something I was alluding to is like the lack of conversation around this in our culture specifically. In other cultures, there's definitely more preparation as we transition or initiate into experiences. However, in this one, we are robbed of that, really. You have to go Google it on your, like you click the thing in like a private thing, so nobody knows you're looking at it, kind of the web browser. And it starts for me, like I can feel it in my chest, and it flushes up my neck and into my face and head. And it kind of feels like how when you're sunburnt and you're like, I'm so hot right now, and it's just kind of like coming out of your pores, kind of a feeling, heat. But it's mostly for me upper body, from my chest up, that I've been experiencing this just in the last month or so.
Yeah. My partner, Kendra Dachi, I feel like is perpetually like a nuclear factory of warmth and heat. And it leads to many heated conversations where I'm like, stop opening the windows in the wintertime. Like you're cooking. Anyway.
For sure. The hormonal piece, and that's what it is, right? Is the transformation of how we produce hormones when, like, cyclically as women. And then it starts to really get fun, in air quotes, around transitional time. So on our periods, right before our periods, just after our periods. So that cycle, but then also these cycles of when periods are going to be coming to an end, when that season of birthing, if you will, comes to an end. Also, side note, like geriatric pregnancies start at 35, but then we can have our period till 55. Like, who is selling us this horse shit? That's what I want. Anyhow, I digress.
Tracy Holemeyer, welcome back to the podcast. You're a returning guest, and I noted that it's been over 2 years. It was episode
Yes.
number 74. Can we coexist with trauma and not have it define us?
Yeah. Thank you.
For those who did not listen to that conversation and don't have an amazing memory to recall what happened 2 years ago, who are you? What's your deal? What do you love aside from cold temperatures?
At the moment, ice packs. Yeah, so much, right? So there's this funny thing, like the iteration that we're in at all time, like 2 years ago, wow, like that woman was just setting out on such an adventure and becoming and stabilizing, but also returning to and that unearthing, how we come into a space of right relationship to the trauma that's left in our body as a result of what happens to us. And the only thing that remains true for me is that I am simultaneously rooted deep in the earth and stretching to the heavens, trying to do the most good while I'm here. That's catchy, right?
That was super good.
In this season, in this iteration of me, I have come into what happens as a result of being able to coexist with your trauma, when healing doesn't have to be a full-time job, when we get to explore and be curious and help others and all of those things as a result. And I've really deepened into the embodiment piece, the somatic practicing, honoring the deep feminine within me and like kind of raising up the masculine simultaneously. But it gets to change all the time. It really, I think we talked on that podcast a little bit about the human condition and all that is and what we shy away from in the shadows. And we're always still a work in progress. But for me, once we get to a point that we are in right relationship to our trauma, to our past, to the things that could have taken us out of the game, then what's there? What's possible? What do we get to tap into and explore deeper?
How do you know if you are in right relationship with those things or not? Like, how do you define that, or what does it feel like?
Personally, it feels like I don't have to numb, avoid, run from, or dissociate from the experience that I went through. On the flip side, I don't speak to it with a monotone flavor either, which would be more like the avoidance. So for me, the sweet spot is that I can feel with it, I can be with it, and my nervous system stays regulated in that space with the past.
And so you're not avoiding and you're not distracting and you're not dissociated, but you are feeling what? Like, if you had to wrap that up.
Presence. Yeah, presence. Yeah, secure. I think presence. And like that my being is whole and intact with those experiences. So my presence, because in the avoiding or the numbing or the running from, we're not really present with our life at all.
So like those pieces of your past are now firmly integrated into your wholeness. Is that a way to say it?
And yes, but I want to be really clear that this is an ongoing journey. There's like a recommitment to it every morning. And we get snagged and we fall down and I'll say I have gotten snagged. I have, at times, I have studied internal family systems and one of my protectors is a burner, and she just is like, nope, I'm burning it all down. We're burning it all. I don't want to do this anymore. We're going to burn it all down, and we're going to go get away from it all. Right. Like the leave the fire behind kind of thing. So not to say that I don't get snagged by those things, or that I don't have to keep working on it daily, but that with that commitment to myself, there is an ease and a flow in my life, integrating those pieces in the present time.
I pictured bridge maintenance when you were talking about that. So a bridge connects us to something else, right? And so there might be a bridge from your present to your past. And when you are building that bridge, that might be analogous to the healing process. And maybe some things fall down in that process. You have to repair them. You have to adjust your plans. But eventually, you build the bridge and you're able to go back and forth and connect to that place that previously you couldn't. And like any bridge, you need to check up on that thing every couple of years or every couple of months, because life happens, natural disasters happen, cracks form. And if you don't address those cracks when they start, it can erode the whole structure and the bridge collapses and you're right back where you started. And so it seems like what you're saying there is that you have built the bridge is working pretty good, it's sound, but also that you're cognizant of the nature of bridges require them to be looked at, looked after, maintained.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. And I use that analogy with inner child work specifically, is that it needs to be a collaboration with the versions of ourselves in the past and at the pace we can get to, right? A word that's coming up more and more is like titration. And with any experiment, we add just a little bit of whatever ingredient at a time and let it work itself out. And so when we are building this bridge back to ourselves, you don't rush up to any child and be like, here's the bridge, walk across it and come with me. They're like, Mommy, but that we build this bridge together with the tools that were needed for that version of you in the past. What type of requirements or needs did your inner child or the part of you that this experience happened to make sure it was safety? What are the qualities that make you feel safe or could have helped you feel safe in the past? And then really the bridge is about reclamation, bringing those parts of you forward to be here in the present now, instead of having to stay back on the other side of the bridge because you don't maintain the relationship through the bridge. Exactly.
Is there an example from your life that you could share to give a more tangible explanation or of what that actually looks like? I just picture somebody listening being like, what is all this talk about bridges? Like,
yeah.
what are you talking about? Like, you're off on a
Yeah.
tangent.
So one example that happened to me earlier this year was that I had a surgery that required me to ask for help. And as a child, often felt like a burden if I needed anything at all, right? That I needed to be independent and self-sufficient. And my parents had enough problems of their own to not burden them with my needs, whether that is real or perceived. It was my experience. And so in this surgery, I had to ask for everything. I could not get up out of bed with the exception of like using the restroom. And so I maybe the third or fourth night after surgery, things are always worse at night, right? Like whether you have a cold or you have had a surgery, just like in more pain, closer to like your nerves are less conditioned or something. I don't know what happens there. But I had fallen asleep, and I knew that just on the other side of the door was help. And I looked at my water because I was thirsty, and something in me said, we can't ask for help. If you're that thirsty, go fill your water in the bathroom. Now, the person on the other side of that door upon hearing this, was very upset with me, but at the time would have loved to have supported me. Like, that's what they signed up for. They asked, please let me be here for you. But something in my conditioning over the years made that unavailable. And so I went without, and throughout the night I was thirsty. And when I finally got up to get water, it caused a problem in my system. And the next day, what I realized is that I would have to leave her, the girl that happened to when I was little, on the other side of that bridge, if I didn't provide a safer, better place for her in the now. By not reaching and asking for help, I wasn't any better than she got in her childhood and what she experienced. So the real life example of saying, hey, I need some water. Could you run upstairs and fill up my water in this environment that we live in where we have access to that, right? Was in fact denying the very things that she needed as a child.
Yeah, it's such a good example of how you do one thing is how you do anything, and that there are no small things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the water. It's not about
Right.
the asking even. It's about what it means to you and what it has meant to you in the past versus what you want it to mean moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that feel? Oh, go ahead.
So for me to really bridge that gap between myself and my younger self is that I had to become what I needed and no longer play custody with the past. Like it asked of me to level up who I am in this moment, to rewire and reconfigure that conditioning and the weathering of my experience into reality right now. Mm-hmm. And then mothering myself in that way. And that's part of, right, the transitions and iterations in the feminine that we move through is being that mother to ourselves, what I needed, and then committing to that every day. I don't always show up, and I do fail. And the repair after the fact is always priority. Yeah.
What does your self-talk look like when you realize that you have not done as you desire to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's much nicer. When you and I first started working together, I don't know, 5 years ago, it was pretty self-annihilating. It was pretty, but I also recognized that was never my voice. It was the voices of those that I learned from, that I just put in my own head as my voice. And so the self-talk now is really like radical honesty and being truthful about where I am and naming that this is not who I am, but what I learned and I slipped, right? And how do we raise up a young child we should is not being perfect, but being there to take responsibility and mend that in any way that we can. And as a result, this little inner me has gone from not knowing me at all to learning how to trust me, to reaching for me instead of, biological caregiver, friend, partner, whatever. She looks directly for me. And now the evolution is that I've already anticipated when she will need me, and I'm there to receive.
You're essentially raising an imaginary child that is you inside of yourself while simultaneously living your own life.
Yeah. Yeah, just a common thing there, it's not weird at all. But it's that reimagining, and it doesn't dismiss what happened. It doesn't dismiss what we got. It doesn't erase any of that. But when we have evidence of a different perspective or offering, it gives us choice moment to moment to decide how we respond. Like, if that is what I learned, but I also learned this, how do I want to move as a result? If I learned that 2 + 2 was 5 over here, but 2 + 2 is 4 over here, I now have a choice when I get the equation to make a right answer and to come into right relationship with myself deeper and more.
I'm reminded of this time, maybe a couple years ago. I bought this item off Facebook Marketplace, and I went to meet the guy, and who's a stranger, who was in a big truck and a very kind of gruff looking dude. And at the time, I did not own any Canadian dollars because I had just moved here or whatever. And so I'm like, hey, I got to go to the ATM and get some money, but I'll take this thing that you're selling. And immediately he was pissed. And I felt in my whole system this kind of like, oh God, I've angered a man and I don't like that. So there's some kind of old response. And then I said to him, do you know where there's an ATM? And that like set him off very angry man like, and he raised his voice. He's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. And he was very upset. And I felt myself in the moment shrink to this tiny human. And later I kind of replayed that. I was like, what's going on, bro? Like, what was that? That's so interesting. That doesn't usually happen. And I realized it was, just little Jer, like scared of angry men. And in the moment I had to remind myself, it's like, bro, you're a grown ass man. Like you're good. You got this. Like have a look in the mirror of like, yeah, you got like hair on your face. You're an adult. Like, you got this, bro. Like you're not some 5-year-old little boy anymore. Is that similar to what you're describing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd go a little further and ask, like, what did he need to know? Right? Like the pep talk, or like, you're grown now. Like these versions of ourself where traumatic experience can happen. And the etymology of trauma is that it's a wound. So I'm not going to debate here what constitutes trauma or not, or big T trauma or little T trauma, right? Like if there is too much, too fast, too soon, or too little, too late for you, and it feels like that, if that is your experience, it's subjective to what you know. So just naming that whatever that part of you needed, it's stored there at that time, that little Jer doesn't know that you've grown up. So showing him, hey, look, you're invited here. I want to integrate you in. And oftentimes these memories come up. These parts are shown to us because they are desired. It's the integration of the whole human. Old memories or activation, some people call them triggers, often are those pieces that have been left out of the healing work that we've done, of the development that we've gone through, of the curiosity that led to awareness, that led to growth. Right, that part of us is asking to be integrated in.
I like that reframe. I haven't heard it put like that. It's essentially like poking you on the shoulder of like, yo, like heal me, integrate me.
Like, look at all this amazing stuff you have as a grown man that you don't have to be scared anymore. But what about me? What about that part that was scared at some time? Meeting it in that way.
I was just having a moment because the thing that I bought from that dude is literally the thing that I'm sitting on right now having this conversation. It was like a chair. It's like one of those big exercise ball chairs.
Yeah.
That's weird. It's come full circle.
Yeah, and thanks for that. Thanks for that.
Thank goodness that guy yelled at me. It's great podcast material,
Yeah. I think that's an interesting topic too, is the ways that we learn. And I don't believe that we have to suffer in order to learn lessons. And we always do learn lessons if there is suffering. And that fine line, you hear a lot, especially in this industry, around like a soul's contract or karma, or maybe that's just what, and Jeff Brown talks a lot about this. If I know you know him, but he's like, yeah, the next time somebody tells you, oh, you must have needed to learn that lesson, punch them in the face. And then when they say, hey, what did you hit me for? You say something along the lines of like, oh, well, I guess it was part of your soul's contract, that kind of thing. but it is interesting the way that we learn, and we cannot make it untrue that we learn through experience, specifically hard experience. And I think that's, where we get to choose some too, because we get to decide when the lesson gets to come in, when we advance from that, when we grow from those lessons, et cetera. Like, you couldn't have known the chair would eventually have some significance as to that little, now when you sit there, it's like, hey, little chair, I'm sitting on the chair. That kind of a thing. But we get to learn in different ways, so we can't always conceive of in the moment. And nobody gets to dictate that for you either. Like, oh, what did you need to learn there? I'm sure there's a silver lining. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna shove your silver lining somewhere in a minute, right? I'm not there yet.
I think that's an important point, is you can't rush healing, right? You can't rush grief. It all kind of occurs on its own time scale that is unique to us and different to everybody else. But I've definitely felt the voices inside, like almost pointing at my wrist, tapping, like, come on, bro. Like, that's enough. That's enough sadness. Let's move along. Or, you've been struggling with this for so long. Come on, let's do it. So I think there's a motivating element at times, but also a harshness or a judgmental, critical component that is certainly not helpful, let's say, in my experience.
Yeah, for sure. And when it can be useful as like fuel for drive and like, right action towards well-being, and when it can be punitive or harsh or judgmental or critical, especially from an outside, and we do enough of that on our own. We certainly don't need it from anyone else. Like, listen, nobody can talk to me as bad as I have talked to myself in the past, but thanks for trying,
Yeah.
Maybe come again later.
It sounds like what you alluded to earlier, though, this idea of maturation and coming of age, or experiences, or personal education or evolution. How do you look at that? Like, what is your perspective on that?
So as far as like, I'll speak to the feminine aspect first, and that doesn't necessarily need to be said, but when I speak to the feminine or the masculine, I mean all within me. It's not about gender in this case. But one of my teachers, Maureen Murdoch, wrote The Heroine's Journey. And there's kind of a timeline to the feminine experience. And so we start as children, and then we move into maiden, and then comes mother. And that doesn't mean we birth children, right? It's our birthing years of what we deliver into the world. And then we come into a mature feminine, or, the more like towards eldership, and then crone, which is like being an elder. And what I realized when I was doing a lot of my work around the feminine specifically was that I had missed whole parts. I never really had an actualized maiden. I was very young. I took care of my younger sibling a lot. And then I got into relationship before I was even out of high school, married, and had a child. I just turned 22 years old. And so that age of being this free, wildish nature maiden doing her thing, was bypassed in a way, unbeknownst to me. Again, these are all initiatory experiences we don't get in our culture. And moving into mother so early, the maiden, in her way of trying to be seen and actualized, became problematic to me. I didn't like the parts of me that showed up as immature or troublesome or wild, and wanting to do that didn't fit the criteria of work hard, be a mother, etc. And in Maureen Murdoch's work on The Heroine's Journey, it is that we have this very early split from mother, or from the feminine in our lives, where a couple of things can happen, but the way to win in this culture is in the masculine. Oftentimes that's in the distortion of the masculine, but we have this very early split from the feminine, and we move into that more masculine nature. And I did all of those things. I climbed the corporate ladder. I was successful. I had a child. I checked the boxes. I did all the things. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm not happy at all. None of the things that I did because they were supposed to get me there actually did that. And I was burnt out and I was unhappy, and it took taking stock in and getting support in that. You, as you know, were one of the first people that helped me in that way, and like realizing what I even wanted to do in this world and how far I had come from it. And so stepping away from those things that did not fulfill me. Not easy, not ever. It's a privilege to be able to do that, right? I absolutely know that I had to sacrifice, but not as some do, in order to make that happen. And I moved into and towards that space, deepening my own healing, committing to myself, and in the process, being able to support and help others in that same way. And as I dropped away from that distortion of the masculine within me, I realized that neither my feminine or my masculine had been raised up in divinity. They were through the distortion, through the lens that was modeled for me, or that I saw in our society. And so for me, taking steps closer to my feminine nature, recognizing that Maiden was never the problem. She is my creatrix. She is the muse. Oftentimes she is the one that dances freely and loves loudly and laughs so hard, more carefree, more available, open, less wounded than I became, and inviting her back in and actualizing those missed steps that I had experienced. And as a result, moving from mother now into that more mature feminine phase of my life, I stand at the edge of I can hear the crone cackling at me like, oh dear, you still have so far to go, right? But then no longer identifying as mother, as inner child, any of those things. They're all a part of who I am and where I'm going. And in that space, in that evolution of this feminine part of me, stepping away from the distortion, I've been able to then see what ways I specifically needed to be supported, which most of us look outside of ourselves as identifying as a woman. My feminine needs to be supported. I need to go find a man to do that, and crossing that gender and archetypal lens to I get to be the masculine within me that supports my feminine. And that's not negotiable. Nobody can take that away. It gets to be personal to my needs and is not outsourced. Anything that is outsourced then gets to be a benefit to that, right? So that was a lot.
It was good.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could say more about the phrase raised up in divinity, raised up in divinity. You kind of threw that out there and I wrote it down. I like that line, and it seems significant in terms of how you are looking at yourself and your life. What does that mean to you?
So for me, it's like you talked about having this inner child that I am now responsible for while currently living my life, right? And it is raising up my masculine and feminine and the qualities of how I see the divine, because that we have light and shadow as a culmination of each of these pieces of us. But if you were to take, for example, the Great Mother, right? The mother in her divine is supportive and nurturing and nourishing, and in the distortion is overgiving and smothering and loses her identity in the process. I'll say that can be that way. And so everything that I learned about these aspects and qualities of my feminine were through that distortion. And so if you look at the qualities from the divinity of who we are, right? When we say things like, you are divinely righted to goodness just by your birthright. What does that mean for you? And that's going to be personal and different for every person. It means being in my values, being in my integrity, aligning myself with things that feel right and true and good for me, while simultaneously not doing harm to anyone else. Little catch there. You don't get to just blow through other people, right? But so raising up my feminine in the qualities that I value and what it means to be in my feminine. How do I embrace the lover in me, the warrior in me, the mystic, the medicine woman, all of these different facets and faces that the feminine includes. And then simultaneously, how does my masculine come up to support each of those things in its own? The discernment, the focus, the drive, the ambition, the ability to meet and hold and contain, and all of those things. How do each of those aspects need each other?
So did you do like an internal audit of your archetypes and say, okay, maiden, you're a 2 out of 10. Mother, you're a 10 out of 10. I crushed the motherhood thing, but like the maiden thing and the wild and free, maybe that's a 1 out of 10. And so I need to work in those areas. And as a consequence, I'm going to sign up for a dance class or something of that nature. Like how did you, like, what happens next? Like, so you've identified these huge areas. You're talking about the divinity of yourself. What were the next steps? I'm curious.
So, it's a constant evolution, I believe, in each iteration where you are in your life. Like, what is the next step for somebody who's in their 20s and they're looking forward to this next thing? For me, it is deepening in the richness, in the soil of feminine and masculine archetypes. And it's taking inventory, interrogating, like really getting curious about these things. And funny enough, right, one of the things you and I had talked briefly about was that by finally actualizing my maiden and letting her be a part of this, I became a better mother. Like for the first time in my 22 years as being a mom, just this year, I had the first experience where I felt like a good mom, and it was presencing with my son's pain, being with him while he was sharing with me in a way that didn't deviate from him. Oftentimes when we're sitting with someone and their pain is evident and obvious, it can feel like a lot. When we sit with some, oh gosh, it's like their pain is so hard to hold. I just want them to be better. I don't want them to hurt. I don't want them to suffer. I want to take that away. But all of that is a deviation from the presence, which is all pain really asks for. And being with my pain last year, being with my grief last year, I believe wholeheartedly was the door into this next level of understanding myself. And so I'd love to tell you what the next steps are, but I have to sit humbled and say, I don't have a fucking clue.
So,
right?
I love that.
I had no idea that losing my dad and losing my best friend and having huge transition experiences last year would be the exact thing that kind of invited me into this next level of understanding maturation.
Yeah. And so is it simple enough to say that in the same way that you have an inner child to tend to, that you also have an inner maiden that's also frolicking around in there?
100%. And the mother is in there, and the crone. Like I said, I can hear her cackling, right? And I like to think of memories, like I mentioned earlier, as opportunities to like whisper back in time to keep going. So when I think back to my 20-year-old self and the way she was really struggling and suffering, right? That I imagine her looking in the mirror and me being on the other side of that mirror, whispering encouragement to her when I have a very specific place and time I go to. And I know that the version of me in the future is doing that now. That's why I said, let me sit humbled here, because she's like, don't even try to figure out your next steps, lady. Good try. But I think that's maturation, right? I think that being in maturity is sitting back It's not having to have it all, being really okay with not knowing, with not having the answers, with not being okay. We hear it all the time. It's okay to not be okay. What does that actually mean? That I can rest back in it and stay a while, as long as it's asking me to.
It's so interesting you brought that up, because before we started chatting, I was writing I'm basically making a online course about imposter syndrome. And I talked about precisely that idea of part of the reason that it happens and is problematic for the individual is that there's an extreme discomfort in the uncertainty of now. Like, I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know how the job's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how they will respond. And in that uncertain moment, like, there's this line from what's his name, Richard Rohr. He has this line about, anyway, into that uncertainty demons pour, is the idea. And so we need to sort of stop that spigot. And the way to do that is to get more comfortable being uncomfortable.
I think that hinges is so annoying. Like, pause for the annoying, right? Like, oh, that's so, like, why? Yeah, I just want to stop my feet and be the brat and be like, no, I don't want to be uncomfortable. But one of the first steps in being with discomfort is discerning safety and comfort. One of my teachers in trauma informed arena speaks to, right? Are you safe right now, though? And can you hold on that? Can you anchor to that with this discomfort over here? It's why there is a wellness industry at all. Nobody wants to feel their pain, nobody wants to be in that discomfort. If we could just easy button, swoop, and that would be gone, great, right? Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind with Jim Carrey was like, just go in and erase that one real quick. That'd be cool with me,
Yeah, I think that idea, though, is a giant sort of grenade in the personal development space, which is comfort does not mean that you're safe. Comfort actually is quite dangerous for you at times, depending upon your level of comfort with horrific reality.
Absolutely.
I think, can you speak to some of that? I feel like you have previous experiences with horrific realities. I don't want to say it like that, but like, I know you've lived some life. Can you speak to this idea of comfort and safety?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. And like, as far back as childhood or a sexual assault at like 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, to an abusive relationship that lasted 7 years, to a more recent experience that I left because it wasn't, maybe necessarily horrific as some other experiences, but there is, when we do get regulated around chaos, or we normalize that, you see this a lot with people who are like, I can't slow down. I do best if, right? Procrastinators. Like, oh, I wait till the last minute because the best stuff comes through me at that point. They've just normalized having to get it done under immense pressure a lot of times. And so when you look at like the past or those horrific experiences, when I left that abusive relationship, I couldn't stand silence. I was so addicted to the chaos day in and day out. I had weathered it. I had been conditioned to that being normal, that my nervous system tried to regulate around that. And so coming out of those, we have to slowly, right, as much compassion as possible, to bring ourselves back into like what is homeostasis for us. And that goes in bits. In a more recent experience, not horrific events, but something that I was no longer able to stay in and be myself. And you don't, in my opinion, I didn't survive the horrific one to settle for that mediocre one. Like, that gave me the gumption and the drive to say, pushing back here. It's a no for me. And that safety is an internal job, but that comes down to like embodiment and somatic practicing. things like orienting, right? In somatic abolitionism, we spend weeks on just orienting to our space with our eyes open first and then closed, being able to recognize where we are spatially, right? One of my teachers, Stacey Haynes, talks about our depth and our width and our height, right? The length of our body. How often do you sit there and feel into, I take up space from this part to that part, and from this shoulder to this shoulder, and from my front to my back? Everywhere we're moving in the world, we often don't think about that spatial awareness until we're knocking something over. Oh, I thought I could fit through there, or you bump into somebody. That safety hinges on that.
That idea of taking up space, is that a practical example for you to realize your metaphorical space or energetic space, or what is the intention of doing that exercise, just out of curiosity?
I feel like for me, it lends to the safety that I feel in my body in order to make uncomfortable decisions, have conversations that are hard, etc. So it hinges on that safety piece. And then, yes, like every cell of this space that I'm taking up gets to choose right now. Energetically, how does this align? Emotionally, how does this feel? Right? Like, what does it do to my life to do this? And I feel like I'm quoting a lot here, but I just listened to a podcast the other day, and Trisha Hersey says, your body is the site of liberation. It's not outside of you. It's not somebody else coming to do it for you. So when we take up the full space of our body, we get to make choice and have liberation. She's I can't remember the name of her organization, but it's all about rest and naps. And people are like, oh, it's just about resting, but it's so much more than that. It's pushing back against things that don't align with our truth, grind, hustle, all of that.
It seems like this is related to integrity in some regard, in that if your values and your actions are aligned, if it feels like a hell yes in your body, if you're on the path that you're supposed to travel, etc. And when you were talking previously about misunderstanding chaos as comfort as a consequence of your prolonged exposure to it, when you remove yourself, there is a bit of adjustment going on. But then when you get a taste of that truth or integrity, just for this example, I feel like the more time that you spend in that space, at least in my experience, the more sensitive I become to being out of integrity or exposed to lies or manipulation. I feel like my integrity muscle gets heightened the more that I use it, in the same way that if you take a month away from dessert and then you have a bite of a carrot, it's like, oh my God, this is so sweet. Carrots are so sweet. But I never realized that because I'm so immersed in sweetness all the time. And so it sounds like you went through some really horrific experiences, to use that same language as previously. And then as a consequence of building that integrity component inside of you and honing your truth, that when you were confronted or placed in a position that felt just slightly out of integrity, it sent off the signals and you're like, it's a no. I know that this is a no. I'm making a turn and taking a different trajectory.
Absolutely. And there is the piece around making that little one that I went back to build the bridge for proud. Like, that's a piece that keeps me in alignment all the time. Would this make my little self proud, or would it be more of what she got, or making myself small, or not standing in my truth and integrity? And that freedom that comes with that. And I, again, use those terms broadly and loosely because I know that there are some bodies that don't have as much privilege or access to words like that to use for their truth and their experience. But for me, to keep myself proud of myself, to look at something and say, I'm really proud of that, is an absolute baseline integrity move for me. And I'm a human.
Yeah, I love that idea though, because it works both ways. So you want to keep that little one inside of you proud and to do right by her. But I think going the opposite direction into the future, you've got that crone inside of you that when you're 60 or 80 or 120 and on your deathbed, you're going to want to look back at you now and feel proud of who you are and how you showed up, right? And I think that's a really motivating sort of conversation to have internally.
Yeah.
Sounds motivating.
It is. And I mean, that's when when the storm is on you, you have to have those anchor points to keep on, towards your North Star and what is right and good and true for you, even if it changes and evolves. We have to name and be with. And that, I think, you can't always know all of that if you haven't integrated your experiences from the past, because they're guideposts of where you felt good and where you didn't. So if we're just in this, dare I say, blissful ignorance around our experiences, if we haven't learned those lessons, if we don't reclaim ourselves from those experiences and do better by ourselves, what direction can you go? You're just kind of ping-ponging through in the moment to moment rather than a life that you design and desire.
Or you're just spinning in circles, repeating the same cycles, relationships, patterns, and outcomes endlessly.
And probably blaming somebody else for it.
And shaking your fist at the sky, grunting, and being like, God, this again? Why does this keep happening to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And much love and respect to those listening who do shake their fist at the sky. I use that activity frequently.
Same. I'm like,
it's like, come on. I don't know if you saw, but the other day I went to the farmer's market to purchase some vegetables, but I went on the entirely wrong day of the weekend. And I definitely did some fist shaking at that time of like, seriously, bro? Seriously? I'm like, oh, they must be done for the day. It's 10:30 a.m. and they must have started late this. So frustrating.
It's the wrong day.
Example, but
it is. But those add up, and what, like, gosh, I was working with somebody just this morning and I don't know why I did this bad thing. And we walked it back. And there was an activation just before that got blown off. Was like, oh, that's not why. I'm like, let's go there and see if it actually is why. And it was absolutely why. There was an activation from the past that was yet to be healed, asking to be integrated. And because it got blown off and pushed to the side, it came up with that immature behavior and caused a big mess. What we do as a result of being in that activated state versus the regulated state is two totally different worlds we end up in.
Really?
I mean, from a few experiences that I've had where I've actually done things from a regulated state, I can say it's pretty juicy.
Really? You're telling me. If I regulate my nervous system, my life will be different. Yeah, and as you said, it's the work of a lifetime.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, baseline, right? How to be regulated, how to be where it's not unfazed, it's not unbothered, it's not indifferent. It's actually very much the opposite. It's very much aware in the present moment of how something is affecting you, and then having the capacity to be with it and come back to a homeostasis or a baseline of regulation. You have these, it's called the window of tolerance. And if you do polyvagal, you don't really do window of tolerance. And if you do window of tolerance, it doesn't really align with polyvagal, but there's an overlap there, because when we are in our window of tolerance, when we're in that ventral state of polyvagal, there are dips into hyper or hypoarousal, depending on what happens. And those happen all the time. We cannot not be affected. Well, I mean, I guess you could go live like somewhere where nobody is and just not. do
I
people,
did
no peopling.
10 days in silence. It was pretty easy to not be affected by things.
Yeah, totally.
I'm being simultaneously very affected by everything happening internal.
I can
Not sure.
imagine what a shakeup. Yeah.
You
But
could go
from
live
that
in a
place,
cave,
right?
Tracy. Yeah,
You could go live where? I missed that.
in a cave.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The cave you fear to enter. Is that Joseph Campbell? Yeah.
Mm.
He did say some good things after all. So, but if we can learn, right, kind of map out when my body goes into this lower state or hypoarousal, depression, isolation, numbing, avoiding, whatever. What do I need in healthy ways to get me back? And then when I go up or to an anxious state or to those, you know, more, I don't like really saying high and low states because I don't want to make one good and one bad, right? But the goal is to be kind of right there in the middle. But we move between them all the time. We're not going to be unaffected. That's the point. It's like, what are my roadmaps? What are the bridges back, right? To use the analogy again, what is the bridge back from this place to my goodness, to my wholeness, to my regulated self when I get pinged or when I'm angry or raging or using my body in negative ways to keep up, work, drive, all of those pieces that come in. How do I walk my way back into a regulated state? And it's practice and practice and practice and practice.
Because each of those examples you just mentioned is essentially a crack in the bridge, right? The bridge to connection, the bridge to regulation, the bridge to
Absolutely.
healing. Well, Tracy Holemeyer, what have we not talked about by now?
I was like, pick a topic. Sure, we can do that. All of them. I pick all of them.
All of them. For those listening who are astounded by your genius and want more of you, I know you have a website and an Instagram account and that you do coaching and breath work. We haven't even talked about breath work.
I know. One of those modalities that helps us as a map tool to get back to
How did you make it nearly an hour without saying the B word? I'm astounded. You're such a proponent of it.
I know I am. That's so funny. Well, I also do talk about it everywhere. So sometimes it's nice to have a little break. What would you say about breath work with me in your experience?
I think that you're a really gifted breathwork facilitator. I mean, I've literally paid you money to come in and work with groups of people that pay me money to coach them. So I trust you. And I've seen firsthand in my own body and in the bodies of my clients how impactful breathwork is. And I think that still breathwork to me is a modality that is underappreciated by the vast majority of people in the personal development space. I think that a lot of people still don't have personal direct experience doing it or learning about it or understanding the holistic implications of what it can do for your nervous system and peace of mind, etc. I think you're great. I mean, I honestly don't have experience with a lot of people teaching breath work because I'm around really good people doing it. But I would put you up in that caliber, certainly. I think that you create a very good, safe space. And I think to tie this back to what you were talking about earlier, I think you have considerable mother energy. Like you're very maternal and you're very caring and you're very loving and you create safety in those that you communicate with. And so in the spaces that I've seen you guide, it's been very profound and the response has universally been good. I mean, I've sent you, I think, compliments that I've received on your behalf.
For sure.
So yeah,
I think
put that testimonial on your website.
I'm going to. I'm gonna just copy paste right there. I appreciate that. And I think that's, it becomes a modality we get to use in the healing container. I love doing breath work and I love using breath work. And I also acknowledge when it can be not a fit for individuals as well, right? Just like every other healing tool and modality, you got to find the one that's like a good fit for you and your experience. But breathwork isn't owned by anyone. We breathe all day, every day. Is the first thing we did when we got Earthside, and it'll be the last thing we do before we leave. And so I like to use breathwork often as, it's kind of like the spin cycle on the wash, right? You put the clothes in, you got the water, and you got the detergent, and all that is great, right? I got intentions of healing. I'm in a safe container. Cool. Now what? The breath work and other somatic practices elicit an emergence of what's happening with that agitation piece, that spin cycle, if you will. And so I love to use breath work where it is supportive in a healing journey. And I also agree that it is highly underutilized, and I'm happy to introduce people to it, especially in a trauma-informed lens, because that's how I learned. And and it should be available to all people because it is just your breath, so I do offer monthly classes. I have a first free coupon for anybody who is trying breathwork out with me for the first time. So if you go to my website and see a class you want to join, you just type in first free and you get to come for free. I also, all of my offerings, somatic practitioner, breathwork guide, meditation, all of those other things are on a sliding scale because I believe in accessibility for all bodies. And website is uncontrollablyme.com. Instagram is at uncontrollably_me. And all the good stuff is there for sure. We've got a couple of sessions left for November. Right before Thanksgiving, we're going to do one about honoring the self with a capital S, because we can get we can play small sometimes with our family. We get back in that environment. And so honoring the self just before Thanksgiving. And then I'll probably just do one maybe in December, but I offer 60-minute sessions. And then I also offer 30-minute sessions called quickies, because why not? It's fun. So if you only have a half hour of time, for the audience, Jeremy just did smile big. He just did laugh out loud on that one. A nod of the head there. And then my, it's really a somatic healing container, an embodiment container for healing on that deeper level, if breathwork isn't enough too.
Just to drive that point home, if you're listening, Tracy is offering you a free breathwork class via her website using the coupon code FIRSTFREE. Is that fair? Is that what you just
That's
said?
it.
So
Yeah.
Anybody listening, the thousands of people listening, literally can get a free breathwork class if they've never ever done it.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
And if you've done it and you've never done it with me, they can try it with me for free. So even experience, and I go through everything, whether you're brand new with breathwork or you're advanced in breathwork, and I'll offer, similar with like yoga, I'll offer a more advanced option, because really breathwork is about agency and sovereignty and listening to your body. So you get to go as slow or as fast, right? As gentle or as activating as you need in breathwork.
Well, it's always a treat to talk to you. We didn't even mention how this conversation arose, because we were just chatting about life and stuff, and you were asking me, how do I get on more podcasts? And I was like, you can be on my podcast. Let's do it. That's fine. Yeah. So if you never hurts to ask for what you need.
For sure.
And yeah, just selfishly, it's been really wonderful just seeing your life unfold over the last 5, 10, 20 years, or however long it's been since our paths have crossed. And
it was like 2017, I think. 2017. So what is that? 5 years. Just over 5 years. Yeah. Yeah,
it's been very very inspiring watching your path unfold. And I really do believe in your work, and I think you're doing some great stuff out there. So I'm happy to chat and support anytime.
I appreciate you. And really, like, it's a testament to how much can happen when someone believes in you. right? That got me emotional just saying that, because in the moment that you were like, you're already doing it, it was like everything shifted for me, because I was able to see myself in a way that I wasn't seeing myself for the first time. And so that belief, just one person, right, in support of your what's possible, became a reality for me in that moment. So thank you.
Yeah. And just, we should share the backstory. So you hired me to coach you. You were a coaching client of mine, and you wanted to start essentially doing what you're doing right now, like living that life. And you're like, but I've only got a blog and a website and offerings and a newsletter and an Instagram, and I'm posting. And I was like, what am I going to teach you? You're doing everything already. And to have that light reflected back at you, I think was significant and profound. And we need that. I was literally just talking to a friend of mine, Brennan James, who was on the podcast. I've known him forever. And he just went to a photography retreat to hone his craft and try to learn some things. And he said the exact same thing, that he sat down one-on-one with this famous, renowned photographer going through his portfolio. And the guy told him, look, man, you should be like tripling your prices. You're legit good. You're really good. And his experience was that was so transformational, like that he just really in his soul needed to hear that. And I think so many of us need that too, which is why we should be hiring coaches and going on retreats and doing all of the things. So thank you for sharing so openly there. And
and real quick, I think it's not because coaches or guides or facilitators tell you something you don't know, but in that space that you do know also exists the imposter, also exists the one that wants to burn it down, also exists the one that is a critic or a judger. And so what somebody sitting across from you validating that in you does is it gives weight and gravity and growth to the knowing that you do have within you. And you just borrow it a while to grow yours, to fight off the imposter, to fight off the critic that says you can't, to fight off those stories that you learned about yourself from somebody else's mouth.
Yeah. And to bring it back to your nervous system stuff earlier, like co-regulation, you can borrow someone else's nervous system for a time to chill yours out and get back to a normal state. And I view that in people too. Like we all have these different archetypes inside of the cheerleader and the judge and the critic and the artist and the etc. And sometimes our cheerleader or our champion, our biggest fan, is small and quiet and in the corner and is never given the microphone. And I view sometimes as a coach or just as a friend or as a partner, you need to grab that microphone and drag that little champion up to the mic, like tell the rest of these knuckleheads in your brain how good you are and how proud you are, etc. And that can feel so liberating, but also potentially emotional, as you just recognize. Like, oh, it's so special when that does happen.
So special. Eternally
always
grateful.
an honor. Always an honor. Super proud of you. And like, can't wait to see what happens next in 3 years, like New York Times bestselling author, Tracy Holemeyer, the third, like, who knows who you'll be. You probably won't be the third, though. That would be weird.
Well, you never know what can happen in this world. Like, just hold on, okay? Don't put anything out of orbit, No, and you're right. And it's just such a blessing to be able to help and share and all of that. And I'm grateful for spaces like yours that are challenging what's acceptable to talk about and what, like I sent it to you in that email, like the curiosity that you lend is inviting for others to be more curious. And when we get curious, gosh, everything is just pops. Everything's available. So thank you.
Yeah, I hope so. Like I try to do episodes about stuff that I just want to know about. Like I've done entire episodes about periods and menstrual cycles. And I have written down in the other room, I want to reach out to a expert on suicide and also enlightenment, Like, these people have to be out there. I just think it would be so cool to be like, so you person on the screen, you're an expert in enlightenment? Like, just say some shit.
Say
Just
more.
yeah, talk to me about this. I want to know.
I
Okay,
love
well, we
it.
need to wrap this up because we could
Yeah.
talk forever. But again, if you're listening, free breathwork class using the coupon code FIRST free. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can find Tracy online on Instagram, and you can pay her money in exchange for goods and services. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.